Do you ever start a project that grows and grows and gets out of control? Yeah, me neither. Hey there, hobby friends. Welcome back to Caffeinated Miniatures. If you're anything like me, and if you are, I am so sorry, then sometimes you start with a simple idea that gets out of hand. So join me, dear viewer, as this project gets big, then bigger, while I slowly lose my mind. This all started back in October, or Orktober if you will, with this idea to print and paint the Orc Combat Patrol, but out of orcs that I truly loved. Now my friend Tanya, or the War Mistress, has an enormous army of super cool orcs, all from Gear Guts Mech Shop. So that's where I started, and straight away I came across these pirate bruisers. I immediately printed up some boys and this badass boss. When starting up a project like this, I like to start with a character or some model that I just need to paint. I just find that working out a color scheme on a fun mini that I'm truly excited to paint is just the easiest way to go. So with that in mind, I started laying down some color on this boss. Initially, I hosed this whole dude down with dark jade. Then I grabbed jade and began spraying the front of the model and some of the upward facing surfaces on the back. Finally, I sprayed burnt orange from the direction of the light. This helps create sharp contrast between shadow and light right from the get-go. Switching to the brush, I started in on the skin with a mix of jade and bright pale green, thinning it down to be quite transparent so as to allow the underpainting to come through just a bit. And additionally, I leave the deepest recesses completely alone, really helping to emphasize that light. As I built the volumes, I added more and more bright pale green, creating a kind of drowned flesh color that I thought fitting for some pirate orcs. Happy with the skin, I moved on to the shirt. As there was going to be a decent amount of color on the rest of the model, I kept the shirt pretty neutral and non-eye-catching, starting with some light umber. Leaning into my sketchy style, I applied the paint with thin, scratchy marks. Then continuing with those scratchy marks, I mixed in more and more pale yellow, building up some slight texture to the shirt. Using those same brush strokes, I used a mix of jade and light umber and started painting the pants and various belts and straps. Once again, mixing in some pale yellow to build some sketchy volumes and highlights. With some of those smaller details sketched out, I moved on to his armor. More than a year ago, I painted some orcs and goblins from Blood Bowl with orange armor and thought that would fit well with this guy's skin, so I grabbed burnt orange and started sketching out the light placement. Now you'll probably hear this in basically all my videos, but I generally don't blend, and I was not about to start with this guy. As I built the light, I gradually added more orange. I didn't do that many layers here. By the third or fourth layer, I was at pure orange. Then mixed in a small amount of pale yellow for those brightest points. In a very similar fashion, I continued painting the rest of the metal in a desaturated bluish steel, starting with a dark mix of Payne's Gray and bright neutral gray. Again, I didn't apply many layers and kept things pretty sketchy as I wanted to be able to easily translate this scheme to 20 orc boys. So after slapping color on this guy for 3 or 4 hours, I was ready to smash this scheme onto a bunch of troopas. Hey friends, Editor Jared here. I just needed to jump in real quick to let you know about the December sale over at Gear Guts Mech Shop. During the month of December, everything in their massive catalog is on sale. Physical miniatures are 15% off, and all STLs are a whopping 30% off. So do yourself a favor and check it out. And if you're going to capitalize on any of those sweet discounts, consider using the affiliate link down below. It costs you nothing extra, but it keeps this channel running. Anyways, back to the video. They're smaller and had fewer giblies, so I figured I could knock them out considerably faster. Which I did, managing to get results I was fairly happy with in less than an hour per mini. Then, in the middle of this, Gearguts released these skeletal orc troopas, and it completely shifted the direction of, well, everything. I immediately thought of Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. What if these orcs were cursed, and instead of 20 pirate bruisers, I had 10, and 10 skeletal boys. And if I did that, then, they need a ship, right? Well, apparently my wild ideas are exactly the kind of ideas that Gearguts likes, because mere minutes after talking to Tanya about this wild idea, I had the files for these skeletal boys and a bruiser fortress, which, however big you're thinking when you hear the word fortress, it's bigger. After printing out some skeletons and priming them in dark neutral gray, I hosed on some underpainting. First covering the whole of the Mini with dark blue, then spraying jade on the front from above, focusing on the head and upper facing surfaces. Grabbing the brush, I started painting all these bones with about a 1-to-1 mix of light umber and bright neutral gray. I kept this very quick, sketchy, and slapdash, really focusing on keeping strong contrast. Then enhancing the volumes with a couple of layers, increasing the bright gray each time. This gives us a nice, eerie looking bone that I thought more fitting than a typical ivory bone color. To keep painting time to a minimum, I really relied on the underpainting for these weapons, just painting a few bright points of light and some edge highlights. Good from far, but far from good. What would a Caffeinated Miniatures video be without a little bit of kinda good but kinda shit painting? Partway through painting these skeletons, I thought I should really look at this fortress. And yeah, it's huge. The hull was 6 pieces and I could only fit 2 of them at a time on my Mono 2 build plate. So while my printer ran around the clock for a couple of days, I decided to work on some bases. Prior to starting this giant ship, I had run off a bunch of these pirate base toppers from Gearguts. After gluing them to the bases, I sprayed them down, some with dark blue and some with dark purple. Then sprayed them all with burnt orange at a pretty steep angle, creating some very directional light. Then with a brush, I sketched in some wood grain with light umber and pale yellow, much like I had done on the barrel of the boss. Then paint the various skulls, similar to the skeletal orcs. And these bases were good to go. The boss's base was a little different. As that barrel wasn't complete, I thought it would be kinda out of place on the similar topper. So I slapped on some dark blue and jade. Then a thick layer of water gel effects from AK Interactive. Once that was dry, I applied a little more of the water effects, with a stippling motion to create a little more texture. Finally dry brushing some white over the top to give it a bit of a wavy look. About now, all the pieces of the fortress were done, and the reality of how freaking huge it was really hitting me hard. Honestly, it all felt a bit overwhelming, but I knew if I stopped doing, then it would all come crashing down. So I focused on small, manageable tasks, like priming, then underpainting again with dark blue and jade. I kept the engines and the harpooners separate, so they seemed like easy things to knock out. To make things much easier on myself, I decided to heavily rely on weathering, in this case, rust. I heavily diluted burnt sienna, effectively turning it into a thin wash, and slapped it over the engines. Once dry, this created a decent base layer of rust, but it needed more. So I grabbed orange, diluted it similarly, and applied it to the recesses and bolt heads, places where I felt there should be more accumulation. Once that was dry, I was happy enough to call it done. Lots enough contrast and visual interest with very little time investment, perfect for a giant model like this. At this point I was definitely feeling some fatigue with this project, and the madness had obviously set in, since I proceeded to sit at the dining table and sketch in wood grain across the whole of the top deck, much like I'd done with the bases. Then, with some final ounce of clarity, I rusted up all the metal bits. Before we set sail for battle though, there was just one final thing to paint. Well, there you go. Easily the biggest project I've taken on to date. And single mini, if you can even call this behemoth a mini. What do you think? Do you have a giant project in mind? Give me all your juicy project gossip in the comments below. Thanks again to Gear Guts Mech Shop for sponsoring content such as this. Be sure to check them out and the awesome December sale at the link in the description. It helps keep this channel going and at no cost to you. As always, if you made it this far, you are an absolute champion. If you liked the video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe for more mediocre hobby content. And thanks for watching. You are awesome. And I'll see you in the next one.